Well, hello. My name is Angel Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Well, look at us. Episode number 20. You know, it's kind of a big deal. I thought episode 10 was a big deal. 20, even bigger deal. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone who comes back from week to week to week. Or I guess I should say every 2 weeks and every 2 weeks and every 2 weeks. This is a bi-weekly podcast. So yeah, I'm really excited. Episode 20. Thank you for buying me a coffee, supporters. You are carrying the show. I don't sell ads. I won't, at least not for now. I don't want to. Eventually, I may. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Lots of thank yous to Sandy, Jay, Anne-Marie, my dogs, all of them. Say hi back. Lisa, Mark with a C, Deb, you are all awesome people. And for all of those who asked recently, yes, care packs are coming. I did order more merch. You too can buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/truestkind and link to the website crimeofthetruestkind.com. Rate and review the show. 5 stars are my favorites. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Audible, Castbox, and Stitcher. You can listen and follow on all platforms. Those that I just listed are the only ones that allow you to do reviews. I don't know why. I don't make the rules. Thank you, Joanne. Joanne says, I know exactly where she is talking about. I know you do, Joe. Thank you, Annie Pants. We'll call you Annie Pants for the $5. You rock. I'll read it. Pow, right in my sound holes. Tiring of the regurgitated stories and reruns of my other subscriptions, I searched for a more locally based option. I wanted New England stories. Here comes Angel, sashay her way effortlessly into my sound holes. The research is comprehensive, the delivery is coherent, the personal side stories are unassuming but sweet, and more often than not, the no BS footnotes make me snort laugh. I'm looking forward to whatever story comes next. Thanks so much. Tell your dog I said hi. All right, so I will ask you for all of those important things. Please subscribe, rate and review. Follow on socials, Crime of the Truest Kind on Facebook and Instagram, at Truest Kind on Twitter and TikTok. And on today's episode, I will share another promo for a true crime podcast. Today, it will come from Crime Scenes. They come to us by way of Texas, I do believe. We did a promo swap. I appreciate that very much. On today's episode, we will stick around Massachusetts and we visit the neighborhood of Allston. And today, the story of Abel Harris. I hadn't spent any time thinking about how Allston got its name, but I found out. It comes from the American painter and poet Washington Allston. He lived to be 63 and died in 1843. He's buried in the old burying grounds at Harvard Square, in between First Parish Church and Christ Church in Cambridge. Allston has a very famous zip code. Now, if you were a kid in the 70s and 80s, it is very likely you watched that show Zoom. Long before we ever knew what a video phone call was, Zoom was the show that was taped at WGBH Studios in Allston, Massachusetts, and it starred a rotating cast of kids. Someone listening to this very show may have been on Zoom. The show aired on PBS from 1972 to 1978, with reruns through 1980. Did you speak ubby-dubby? Allston has its own holiday. It's called Allston Christmas. Allston Christmas falls on September 1st. But it starts at the tail end of August and lasts for about 2 weeks. It is the annual ritual of students cycling in and students cycling out of their shitty Allston apartments. But it's not solely Allston, though. There are more than 50 institutions of higher education in the Boston metro area, which enroll about 250,000 undergraduate and graduate students in the region. But what's the Christmas in Allston Christmas? It is the amount of free stuff piled on the sidewalks during this time. All levels of stuff. Some of it is very new, used for just that year, discarded on the sidewalk, never to be thought of again. Some of it, as you would imagine, is terribly banged up. And what is that gift that keeps giving during Allston Christmas? Well, it's bed bugs. It is a notorious byproduct of this practice. You could score a great find, like a brand new couch, but the 2-for-1 deal on that is it's infested. I'm itching just thinking about it right now. Another tradition we celebrate has come to be known as starrowing. Place your bets as to when the first U-Haul gets jammed under the low overpass. It's so very Boston not to build the bridges high enough for trucks to pass. Jokers we are. The city of Boston issues warnings every year, and I quote, "Repeat after us. You cannot drive a moving truck on Starrow Drive. You cannot drive a moving truck on Starrow Drive. You cannot drive a moving truck on Starrow Drive." Hashtag moving day. Allston is the place where the rock clubs and the hot spots of the time were. It's grungy and rough and kind of charming in its own way. A rite of passage for many kids from the suburbs who were looking to get into the music scene. For students looking for lower rents of Lower Allston, it was also very attractive. It's the kind of neighborhood where you could get into a rental situation with like 7 other housemates and pay a few $100s a month, privacy not included. There are many things about Allston that are endearing. My list includes the Model Cafe, Great Scott, O'Brien's, that Burmese restaurant next to the Model, thanks to that person on Twitter for identifying it, the Deep Ellum patio, Rug Road, the Sunset with like 1,000 beers on tap. I worked in Allston, closer to the Brookline side, and I knew it was a great night at Great Scott, judging by the amount of throw-up on the sidewalk as I walked by. I love these kinds of stories, so I asked some locals what some of their favorite things about Allston were. Allston Beat, Twin Donuts, Nights at the Sill, aka The Silhouette, a favorite dive bar, Fly Rabbit, Allston AmVets, Rednecks, The Grecian. One of my longtime musician friends said, growing up in a community of cool musicians and artists, cheap rent once upon a time, the phase when there were multiple live clubs within a few blocks of each other, cool stores, cool people, killer food, cheap, Mr. Butch, post-Chem War. Another friend mentioned Mr. Music, and I add, in the video Cave-In shot there, somebody on Twitter wrote, the rock on Harvard Ave that has Sir Paul Dudley White's name on it and also some bird poop and paint. Charming. Boston Calling moved to Allston. The Big Time Music Festival, formerly of City Hall Plaza, is now at the Harvard Athletic Complex where it moved in 2016. I think it's the right place for it. Allston Rock City. I don't know who coined that phrase. Some say it's Tim Katz. And I don't know when they coined that phrase. Mid-80s? What I do know is that Allston, the neighborhood in Boston that's been a hub of students for as long as I have been involved in the music scene, Allston was happening way before I arrived in the fall of 1996 to go to school. I had been to Bunratty's all of one time in the 1990s, where I called out sick from my restaurant job to drive from New Hampshire with a band who were playing a day show. I do remember the sun was out. The Boston rock scene in the 1980s is legendary. I spoke to a few people about this story, one of whom was directly involved in Abel Harris's life, David Giammatteo, the manager of Bunratty's in Allston for 8 years. He was Abel's friend, his boss, and he was there that night when Abel was shot inside the club. The other is someone who grew up in the Boston rock scene going back to the 1980s, a veteran and willing participant of all the things, good and bad, that it had to offer. And he's the one who told me about the story. Jesse Von Kenmore. He played drums and plays drums in many bands, including, but not limited to, Shake the Faith, Ragged Old Flag, The Marvels, The New Alibis, and Diablo Gatto. There are more, lots more. We did speak a few times on and off the record, on and off tape. None of it made it for this broadcast, but he was there the night Abel was shot. He spoke of how it was unfathomable, even among the haze of youth, to imagine that such violence could touch down in a place like Bun's, short for Bunratty's. Bunratty's, Like its punk rock counterpart, The Rat, down the street in Kenmore Square, they were different. They were clubhouses, open during the day for drop-ins and afternoon hangs, second homes for so many who lived nearby. He recalled many day drinking sessions where Abel Harris was there, prepping the place for the night's festivities, rolling around on his staple roller skates. Abel Harris was part of the family of misfits, outcasts, and searching souls. That is what makes the events of the early morning of August 1st, 1987 so difficult to reconcile. Earlier that night, some guy nobody knew was being annoying, bumping into band members as they were trying to get ready to play. He just couldn't handle himself. That's when he was asked to leave the club. The Boston band Bang was playing that night, not to be confused with Bang Camaro, which came much later. Bang were doing well. They were making a name for themselves. It was the mid-'80s, and bands like Whitesnake and Motley Crue and Poison were on the charts. The number one song the week Abel Harris died was Alone by Heart. That video aired no less than 100 times a day on MTV. A year earlier, Bang won the MTV Basement Tapes for their video, Summertime. Thank you for indulging me while I listen to that rock and roll ditty from Bang, going back to 1986. I mean, that's worthy of a MTV Basement Tape win, don't you think? Bang played the 1986 WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, Boston's big-time rock showcase and battle of the bands, which still goes on to this day, I know, because I run it. The punk band Gangrene upset the apple cart by winning that year, beating out Hearts on Fire, which featured a guy on guitar that goes by Johnny A. The Bristols were in that year, Volcano Suns, that band formed by Peter Prescott of Mission of Burma. In the early hours of August 1st, Bang were wrapping up their set when the man who had been asked to leave hours before re-entered the club. He pulled out a gun and shot 3 times into the ceiling. Now, at first, some people in the packed room thought the sounds were probably part of the band's set. It took no time for patrons and regulars to be running for cover. The band had no idea what was going on until they saw everybody hitting the deck. That's when Abel Harris hopped over the bar and approached the shooter with his hands up in a "I come in peace" posture. The weapon clicked instead of firing, and Abel got closer to try to calm the guy a bit. And that's when the man pointed the gun and fired 2 bullets into Abel Harris's head. The man nobody knew walked out of the club, and Abel laid on the floor as David, the manager, learned what happened and called for help. It took next to no time for an ambulance to arrive and rush Abel to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Brighton, a 4-minute drive. Abel remained in a coma for 9 days. He never regained consciousness. Friends and family sat vigil throughout. Meanwhile, the day after Abel was shot, police received information that identified the assailant. A 30-year-old from Quincy, out on parole from Cedar Junction State Prison in Walpole, where he had served time for an array of offenses, including breaking and entering, larceny, and the rape of a Quincy woman in 1981. A warrant was issued charging James Wallace with assault with intent to murder, assault and battery, and unlawful possession of a firearm. Police departments nationwide were alerted to be on the lookout for Wallace, who was believed to be at the time headed to Las Vegas to marry his pregnant girlfriend who was traveling with him in a brown 1983 Chevy pickup truck. Have you heard anything so goddamn romantic? On the run with a convicted rapist who committed a violent assault with a deadly weapon? Put that on a cake. On August 7th, as Abel Harris lay in a hospital bed in Brighton, Massachusetts, police were tipped off that James Wallace was likely to be staying with his brother in Salina, Kansas. Who tipped off the police? Was it possibly the girlfriend who had seen news coverage of her fiancé wanted for attempted murder? Don't know, probably, maybe. I choose to believe that it was.
Everyone, I'm Bolton.
And I'm Grace.
And we're the hosts of Crime Scenes, a true crime movie podcast.
Each week we recap a movie that is based on a true crime,
while also giving you extra info about the real events that we gather through our own research.
We will tell you all about the facts of the real events left out of the movie.
And all of the fictional drama that Hollywood has added in because, you know, it's Hollywood.
And every once in a while, we like to add in our legal opinion about these true crimes because we are both lawyers.
The movies never get the courtroom scenes right.
Okay, save it for the episodes.
So check us out. We are Crime Scenes, a true crime movie podcast.
Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
That's Crime Scenes, a true crime movie podcast. Hear about the movie and the real story.
According to the Boston Globe archives, Salina Police Captain Gary Hinman said in a telephone interview that he received a call late on Thursday, August 7th. It was the Boston police asking for help in capturing Wallace. Hinman said he was told that he might be staying with his brother in a duplex on South 5th Street in Salina. Officers staked out the house and confronted the suspect at approximately 1:10 in the morning as he drove up with his brother. Wallace gave chase, first on foot to a nearby garage where he stole a car and took off. That escape was brief. He blew out a tire when the car hit a set of railroad tracks, where he was on the run again. 20 minutes later, the Kansas cops had him in custody. He no longer put up a fight. A representative from the Massachusetts Parole Board traveled to Kansas to retrieve Wallace. And why would they do that? Well, he had already violated his parole before he shot Abel. He was returned to Boston to be arraigned on charges of assault with intent to murder, assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon, and unlawfully carrying a firearm. Those charges would change 1 week and 2 days after Abel Harris was shot in the head. He was simply trying to keep the peace and the patrons of Bunratty safe from someone who felt wrong somehow and returned for some sick revenge. Abel died on August 10th at 4:17 p.m. in a bed at St. Elizabeth's. He never woke up. He never saw his friends who so faithfully sat vigil for him. He never knew how the community rallied to help and support him, like he had done so many times for them. David Giammatteo was the manager at Bunratty's for 8 years, the famous and sometimes infamous rock bar in the Allston section of Boston. I talked to him about many things, about Abel, about their relationship, about the bar itself, and the rock scene in the 80s. Because I love it, and it is such a golden age of music in the city. I spoke to David on the telephone, and I used a third-party app on my iPhone, and, well, I'm never going to use that again. But this is our conversation.
Thank you for talking to me. This story is of great interest to me for a couple of reasons. I have been in Boston and in music and in radio since the late 90s when I was in college. So it has a great deal of interest because of the Boston rock element, because I love to hear stories about the Boston rock scene before I was in it.
You miss the good old days.
I hear that a lot. And I also want to share the story of Abel Harris because this is a really beloved figure in the city, I know, by everything that I've read about him. I think it's a story that people would want to hear, especially people who were involved in the rock scene then. And I didn't know the story until my friend Jesse Mayer told me about it. And he said, I think you would really like to tell the story. And he's absolutely right. And he suggested contacting you because you were in it.
Oh, yeah.
Were you known as David G. during the time?
Yeah, pretty much all my life. People struggled with my last name.
They can't say Giammatteo very well?
Well, you did that very well.
David Giammatteo, David G. Take me back to Boston Rock in the 1980s because I love it. And it's such a golden age of music in the city. Let's go back to that time when were you playing music yourself?
No, I was a club manager.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were there for about 8 years. Do I have that right?
Yes. At the club for 9, but manager for 8, correct.
So what got you into it? What led you into taking on the beast that was Bunratty and Allston?
When I graduated college in 79, I just needed it was a part-time job as a doorman. My degree was in recording and engineering. Yeah. But my interest is always working with bands, not necessarily in the studio, but in general. And in college, I was known as Mr. O, Mr. Organized. I was the one that organized the parties. I organized the bands.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long when I was a doorman to be taking an interest in everything about the place.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, 9 months later, I was the manager.
And what did that entail for you? Were you handling, booking as well as managing everything that came with it?
Correct. Everything that came with running the club. And I pretty much learned it all in those first 9 months from the previous manager. And it's funny, a couple things, and that is worth mentioning or not, I'm not sure. But the day I became manager, I quit drinking.
Wow. It might have been a good thing for your history.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we were one of the few clubs that had the 2 o'clock license. Mm-hmm. And it seemed as though the managers of the 1 o'clock clubs always ended up at our club for last call. Good people, but they got to be too drunk and crazy. And I just said, I'm going to be in this business and manage. I can't be one of them. And I went forward from there. And one of the first things we did at Bunratty was put ourselves on the map. I mean, we were known as a rough and tough nightclub, good rock and roll. But I was probably the first club in Boston to put a professional PA in, more than we needed. We didn't need the amount of watts and power we had, but in a good sound, you want to crank it up. You don't want distortion. So I talked the owner into putting a good PA in, and that led to all the bands that were making their climb in the Boston music scene wanted to play Bunratty.
Tell me some of those bands that you remember from back then.
John Butcher Active, Fahrenheit, Balloon, The Fools, up-and-coming bands, The Drive, New Man. God, there's so many more. James Montgomery became a regular at the club. Mm-hmm. He was pretty well established already. Given that our capacity was only about 200, we could stuff 300 in, but the legal capacity was 186, I believe. Oh, no, that was our address. It was about 200.
Yeah.
I didn't need those bands to play on weekends. We'd have a good crowd anyway. So I created concert night, Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And that's when I would have John Butcher Estes and Charlie Farron and Fahrenheit and The Fools and James Montgomery. And that got WCOZ and WBCN, WAAF on board doing concert nights. We became that bar in town where all musicians wanted to hang out. Despite the owner arguing with me, if you were a band that played my club, you were welcome anytime for free. I was passing out VIP cards like water.
So people were just getting in for nothing a lot, huh?
They were quote-unquote starving musicians. You may find this comical. On Monday evening, we would often have a jam night, but we'd have a barbecue behind the club in the alley. And it was crazy. Give a starving musician a hamburger that maybe cost me 50 cents, and they would spend $10 in draft beer.
That's the way it should be.
But it's just funny, my investment and the return, they think they're getting, draft beer is cheap, but for them, but it was also cheap for me.
Right, because you had a full house a lot.
A full house, and the jam sessions were incredible. Mm-hmm. I had some of the best sound engineers working for me in town on a great PA system. A couple bands that lived in the area, they would come and, bring all their equipment in. They got to be the opening act, and then everybody got to use their equipment. And if somebody broke a snare drum, I'd pick up the cost. Guitar players always carried their own guitars, how that works. Bunratty just became the hangout for musicians.
Yeah. And students at that point in time were coming to shows. Students back in the 80s were showing up, I'm sure.
Not many. The drinking age went from 18 to 21. And I want to say 80 or 81. So they were my weekend warriors. They wanted to hear more cover bands. They wanted to hear recognizable music. So, they were coming anyway. You didn't get many students. You get some, of course. We were directly between BU and BC.
Great spot. So much has changed there, obviously.
Oh,
I know that. Now, did it become Local 186 after Bunratty's?
Right after. And at that point, I owned and ran the Beat magazine. So I was still staying busy and very involved in the music scene. And then it was a year or two later that it became what it was recently. I forgot what it was.
The Wonder Bar. The Wonder Bar stayed in business for a while, but announced last fall that they were closing.
COVID killed it, unfortunately.
COVID's killed so much.
I got together with Noah, the owner there, many times because he wanted to tap my brain on what it took to get people in there on off nights. Yeah. So, and I feel really bad for him. Really good guy, but like so many, mom and pop, bar owners, they couldn't survive that.
Oh, I know. We saw a place like Great Scott, and Great Scott when Carl Lavin and the people who started building Great Scott up as a rock venue, did a really, really phenomenal job, and would have, I believe, if they could have reopened as Great Scott, during COVID, and now I think that they would have done okay, but it just turned out that the people who own the building didn't want a rock club there anymore.
Right. And it's just, the trickle-down effect. You understand the owner's got a mortgage to pay. Yeah. The club wasn't allowed to even be open.
And there was no promise of when they would be open again.
Correct.
As we have certainly seen. Now we have people scrambling to be able to open, after they listed all of the restrictions at the end of May. I think everybody's just has gone through this weird, social time warp where we don't really know how to behave with each other anymore.
It is really strange, and I am just so excited to go out and start seeing some live music again.
Walk me through what you can remember. Do you remember what year you started at Bunratty's?
79.
79, okay. So you were at the height of sort of the punk rock, New York punk rock scene carrying over into Boston.
Yeah, but that wasn't my club. That was the Rat. The Rathskeller was the king of that stuff. I was more your straight-ahead rock and roll, rhythm and blues-based stuff. And we got along great with the folks at the Rat because we weren't direct competitors other than a few bands. And those were the bands that kind of crossed over, like the Neighborhoods kind of thing.
Was there any sort of, unsaid rule about bands playing both venues? I'm curious.
Yeah.
And, how often they could play?
The unwritten rule was definitely not in the same week.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be able to open the Boston Phoenix and see that the Neighborhoods are playing at Bunratty's on Tuesday and the Rathskeller on Friday. And on the rare occasion that it happened, or, it got by us all, both clubs suffered. And then the trickle-down effect is the band suffered. They had a door deal.
So what do you remember? Let's fast forward to the night that Abel Harris was shot. I know that
July 31st, 1987.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's a date that you will never, ever forget.
I should go back, maybe up to a year. Yeah, I'm not sure how long he'd been working there, but it might have been a year or two at that point. Mm-hmm. And at the time he was shot, he was my roommate.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, he was kind of between apartments and needed a place to crash. And I fortunately had a 3-bedroom condo with an extra bed. So he was kind of crashing with me for a little while.
Wow.
We're more than employee-employer.
You were really close.
Yep.
You were both there that night.
Yep. The individual, I don't even remember his name. I hope I never have to. The shooter, about 9 o'clock that evening, he'd already been in for a while drinking. And he was getting pretty rowdy. And, I mean, it was early. It was 9 o'clock. No bands were playing yet. There was maybe 20 or 30 people in the club. And I just walked up to him and very politely said, "Hey, dude, hey, buddy, whatever. You've had enough. If you leave peacefully, you're welcome to come back here anytime." And he looked at me and went, "Cool, okay." And he left. And he obviously came back with vengeance at about 1:50 a.m. as we were in the band was playing their last song, so it was loud inside. He came in, it must have been before 10 of 2 because we locked the door at 10 of 2. So it was just before that. He came in, little platform at the door, wielding a gun. Wow. Abel, who was bartending that evening, recognized him because I think Abel helped me get rid of him early. And we were never confrontational. It was always, "Hey, buddy, let's take it outside, whatever." And he jumped over the bar and approached him with his hand, Abel with his hands in the air. "Hey, dude, relax." And got him. I was upstairs in the office at the time and heard the shot. I made it halfway down the stairs, and somebody said, "Get back up and call 911. Abel's been shot."
Wow.
Yeah. It was just kind of a very crazy half an hour. I mean, I think the ambulance was there in minutes and had him on his way to the hospital in minutes. You may have heard or read stories from a few individuals that I won't use their names, who were, I was by his side on the sidewalk. No, you weren't.
Boy.
He was on the platform inside.
Right. He never made it out to the sidewalk before they came in to get him.
Correct. And it was just crazy. We cleared the place out pretty quickly. The employees were in shock. And, we were crowded pretty quick. It was a Friday night. We were busy. A lot of shocked people. Nobody
anticipates someone's going to come in with a gun and start shooting.
Right.
But I imagine that it was pretty loud in there. Was Bang playing? Is that the band that was on?
Yes. Yep.
And they were pretty heavy and loud.
Yeah, they were. Yep, loud. And so a lot of people, if you were up by the stage, you just thought it was part of the band,
Yeah.
Snare drum, a couple hits, whatever. People in the back kind of witnessed it and heard it and saw it. It got crazy. Abel was, as you know, he was a young black gentleman, and color did not matter to him, and nor does it matter to me. He would always come in early to help the bands load their equipment in. He would stay at the end of the night, finish his shift, and help the bands load out. He was everybody's friend. Nights off, he was there dancing to every band. Known around town, and especially in Allston, because he roller skated everywhere. He didn't have a car.
I read that.
Yeah. Everybody knew him. All the bands. So when it came time to... And he didn't have a family, really. The family kind of let him down. Never even spoke of him. I didn't know he had any. So we did a couple fundraisers to cover his expenses, medical expenses and burial expenses and funeral expenses. And because his relationship with so many bands, they came out of the woodwork. We had to turn bands down. And we raised a crazy amount of money. I don't know if you heard that we did a scholarship for 30 years.
Did you spearhead that?
So we covered all the expenses, and we had, I want to say we had $11,000 left over at the time. So as a friend of mine was a lawyer who's also a band manager, we secured the money, and we knew that Abel's family, we're going to put that in quotations, was an organization called Youth Enrichment Services, YES. YES took inner city kids and gave them a place to hang out. Their offices are down in Mass Ave, and brought them skiing. So Abel was a ski instructor. He'd bring those kids out skiing during the winter for day trips. And at that point in time, Richard Williams was the president of YES. If there was a father figure to Abel, it was him. So Richard was, I approached him and said, we got this money, and we'd like nothing more than to create a scholarship for the Youth Enrichment Service. It went to 30 years for $1,000 a year. Good investments, and we had a few fundraisers along the way. A few Bunratty's reunions to keep the fund going. And then in 2017, as the money ran out, said, you know what, 30 years is a good mark. So we had a great party at the Wonder Bar. The first recipient of that fund came to it, and many others as well. First recipient, I don't remember his name, was the number 2 man in the Boston Fire Department.
Wow.
Yeah. So every year at the ski show, we would do a presentation because YES would always have a booth there, and my company would have a booth there. So we'd always do the presentation of the check for the the recipient, and it was pretty special. And they're just an absolutely wonderful organization. Back then, trips were on weekdays for the kids to go skiing, and they had to earn the right to get out of school on a weekday, which means they had good attendance, they were good students. And I ended up taking Abel's spot for the following 4 years as an instructor at YES.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I'm still a ski instructor to this day. I work full-time at Wachusett a ski area during the winter.
Because of Abel's influence?
To become an instructor, yes. I went through the classing and got the credentials. I moved too far away from Boston and then could not continue working with YES.
Still in Massachusetts?
I am. I'm out in Westminster, which is Fitchburg area.
Certainly when I put this story together, I'm going to, give some background to the story. Talk a bit about the information that I know about the defendant. To tell the whole story, I do need to include a bit about that. I do not spend a great deal of time on the criminals, but because it's a part of the story, I do need to sort of set that up so people are aware of what happened. And I understand that this person took off and they were found later in another part of the country. And
right. From what I understand, he had been recently released from jail. And when I say recently, I don't know if it was days, weeks, or months. And he was out partying. He lived in the Quincy area.
Yep.
And of course, the investigation was on full tilt to try to find him. I think they figured out who it was. They couldn't find him. The long story short, and this is the best of my knowledge, went home, got his girlfriend, and said, let's take a trip to Florida. They were in a hotel room somewhere along the way. And the girlfriend was watching the news, and it was on the news. It made national news. I think he was in the bathroom or something when she saw it. So she immediately called 911. The rest is history.
They brought him back to Boston. They charged him. I know that Abel, he was in the hospital for about 8 days before he passed away.
Correct.
He never regained consciousness after he was shot in the venue.
Correct.
Do you know if this person was captured and brought back to Boston while Abel was still alive? Or had he already passed away when they found him?
I believe, it was close. But I believe it was after he passed.
So at first he would be charged with probably attempted murder. And then once Abel did pass away, then it would become murder.
And again, this is a long time ago.
Yeah, I know.
I want to say it was after because I think the story re-aired nationally because Abel had passed. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I'm going to dig in a little bit to see what, I have access to a lot of news archives. I don't know if there's any news video coverage available from back in, the late 80s, but I'll try to find it.
In the For What It's Worth department, the next morning, I went to head into work. Obviously, I didn't get much sleep, so I was heading in about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and I come around the corner, and there's news trucks everywhere. So, I remember kind of sneaking into the building. I think I ended up giving Hank Philippi Ryan of Channel 7 I don't know what the right word is, the exclusives. Because I asked, I said, this can't be about a gunman shooting up nightclub. Right. It's, I needed softer coverage. I didn't need the, don't go to Bunratty's. Gunfighters hang out there because it's not what we were. Right. And she was the most, I don't even know what the right word is, pleasant, understood. And I don't remember at the time. Nowadays, it's Hank Philippi, investigative reporter. I'm not sure if she was at the time. And again, that's what, 34 years ago? Holy crap.
So she respected your wishes and made the story about Abel and this beloved person who would help anybody out.
Right. And she did her homework about Abel. She didn't do her homework about, what's with the gunman in a nightclub.
Well, which is really how these stories should go.
See, the key word there is should.
Yeah. And I have learned a lot even in, the year that I've been doing this. I've been doing a crime podcast, is that there's so much about this genre that is actually deplorable about people that are celebrating, sexy serial killers. I'm like, you're out of your mind.
Right.
You're absolutely out of your mind. These people did the most disgusting things. And, Ted Bundy is not hot. Ted Bundy is a disgusting murderer. And worse.
Absolutely.
That's the tone that I take. What I really want to focus in on is Abel and the community and how people really did love him and how he jumped to the aid of these people in this room, knowing that this man was shooting a gun and never probably realizing in the moment that his life was in jeopardy. Nope,
absolutely did not. He absolutely did not.
What about the trial do you remember? Did you attend?
Oh, yes. I was put on the stand. Didn't last long on the stand because I didn't actually witness it because I was in the office. I kind of remember talking about Abel and how he would not promote this action. He was trying to be the calming effect.
Everybody must have been truly confused by this person's behavior because it wasn't. You didn't have a confrontation with him when you asked him to leave.
Right.
That still must be confounding to this day by everyone who witnessed it.
Absolutely.
Did they ever make sense of it? Like, was there something, this man was a criminal, if he was on drugs, perhaps?
Who knows? Again, he was
you don't know.
He'd already been in jail once, that we know of, maybe more. For all I know, he was out celebrating his release. Had a few too many. You have to figure, when he left the club at 9 o'clock-ish, he wasn't jerk or total drunk. He was just a little too happy, we should say. He must have continued drinking, whether it was at home or another place. And that's when probably his fury lit up. Because if he'd stopped drinking, if he'd sobered up, I don't think there would have ever been a problem.
Well, because there certainly didn't seem to be one. He just came back with whatever bizarre notion or idea he got in his head.
Yeah. And, I mean, it was at the 9 o'clock thing, it was very run-of-the-mill. I mean, I'd asked many people for 8 years, hey, buddy, you've had a few too many. Drink this glass of water and you can stay. Hey, if you head out and leave now, you're welcome back. I thought nothing of it.
So when you think back about Abel and how you knew him, what do you think his life would have been? What do you think? What were his goals? I mean, he was very young, and I know that. He had a good support system with you and many of the other people, obviously, at Bunratty's at the time, who were supportive of him. I like to think about the life that the person would have had. What do you think he would have gone on to do?
I think he would have become very involved in YES, Youth Enrichment Services. I think he would have climbed the ladder there because he was mature beyond his years. He was a leader there. The kids that he taught the ski loved him. The staff there loved him. So I really think that was where he was headed.
He would go on to help more people. I think he's aptly named. If you think about the story of Cain and Abel,
Right.
Abel was the peacemaker. Abel was always the peacemaker.
Yep. Because of the organization, because of Richard Williams with his father image, I really believe that Richard would have had him on board.
Well, thank you for talking to me about this, because this is the most important part of the story, is the account from the people who actually knew what happened and knew the person who was taken. That's the most important part.
Right. I'm sure if you wanted, we can come up with a whole bunch of Abel stories.
Yeah.
On Facebook, I have a Bunratty page.
I would love that. Or if they just want to write them, want to put them in an email message or post them on a wall, I can get those too. Cool. Well, this is fantastic. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Yep, I just approved you. Go on. Bunratty's history, you can see a whole bunch of old conversations on there.
I love the history. I mean, I really do.
I mean, the music scene then is just unmatched. I mean, I look in the Beat magazine that I was putting out, and the club listings page was a whole page.
Yeah.
There were so many live music venues for these bands to play, and I know it just doesn't exist today.
So different. It's just so very different.
We had so many clubs in town that were live rock and roll 7 nights a week with multiple bands.
Yeah, and people showed up. People came. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll speak to Jesse again, and I believe he said he was there. I don't remember if he said he was playing.
He was a regular. He was one of those many musicians that, showed up at 12:30. If he either finished his gig or finished his rehearsal, it was the cheers of the day. Everybody knew your name when you walked in.
That's great.
Yeah.
The rock and roll cheers. That's amazing.
It really was, especially on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday nights. Angela, it was very nice speaking with you.
It was great to speak with you. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate this. This is the important part of the story. Take care.
Good hearing from you again. Take care.
James Wallace was tried for murdering Abel Harris in the spring of 1988. That April, after a trial that included testimony about the defendant being drunk and high on the day Abel Harris was shot, James Wallace was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Today, Abel Harris's murderer receives his mail at the Old County Correctional Center, a medium-security resort in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. He is 64 years old. Abel Harris was the model for hard work and loyalty. While the scholarship in his name has been retired after 30 years, Youth Enrichment Services continues in its mission. You can support them by going to yeskids.org. That's yeskids.org. The building that was once Bunratty's, and then Local 186, and then Wonder Bar, is empty and for rent. I can only imagine what will take its place. Because of what I know about Boston and development, I don't think it will ever be a venue again. Thank you for listening. Crime of the Truest Kind, hosted by me, Angel Wood. Everything is available at crimeofthetruestkind.com. All the information about how to follow on socials. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Buy me a coffee to support the show. Oh, visit the merch store. And all of the platforms that you can listen to the show on and leave a 5-star review. Everything up at crimeofthetruestkind.com. Thank you, David Giammatteo. Thank you, Jesse Von Kenmore. Thanks to many of you on the Bunratty's Facebook board who have been sharing memories. I will share those on the show notes page on the website if you would like me to. Thanks, everyone, for the great show ideas. I've been getting your messages and emails. They're great. More merch coming your way, those of you who have asked for it. Have a great week. Happy Father's Day. Until we meet again, lock your goddamn doors.